Here's a discussion with Christopher Chedeau, front-end engineer at Meta. Christopher's involvement in open source spans many projects over the past decade, including being co-creator of React Native, Prettier, Yoga, Excalidraw, and quite a few others. Christopher's work has empowered millions of people around the world to develop applications with JavaScript in ways many had not thought possible. This is Pioneers in Open Source. Chris, dude, you are an absolute titan when it comes to open source, and you've worked on a ton of open source projects. And here's my cat jumping in, as I mentioned a little earlier. So as a front-end engineer at Facebook, you've had plenty of opportunities to work on various open source projects. For those who are just learning about you, given that we have lots of folks joining front-end engineering these days through JavaScript and the web, can you describe exactly what you do?
I'm really excited about technology and solving problems. And so what I do is basically I find what actually annoys me on a day-to-day and try to figure out what is the better solution. And so if you look at all of the projects I've been working on, it's been this same recurring pattern around hey, there's a problem, how do we fix it? So Prettier was about hey, how do we actually solve the finding and putting spaces and in the right spaces? Excalidraw was oh, I wanted to draw an illustration for my blog post. Hey, I want to build a tool for doing this. So yeah, it goes on and on.
You are not just solving a problem for you, but you find that problem is something that others are dealing with. How does that translate to you as a person, as a feeling?
So I think for this, one of the things is I'm a very social creature. And ever since I've been starting, I don't want to do things on my own. And I've been sharing all of the things I found. I'm playing a lot of video games with people and everything. And so for me, it's less about how I can help others, but more hey, if I'm doing something, I'm going to do it with other people, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. In fact, I was listening to the Lex Friedman podcast recently, and the creator of Python was mentioning that that coding itself, programming, is very much a social thing. And in looking at your history, it's very clear that you very much are a social creature. Even though you're able to solve these problems, I'm going to say you're built a little differently relative to other folks, where lots of very smart people are introverted. And I don't know, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're somewhat extroverted. So you contrast compared to other folks out there in the world. When it comes to the idea that you've worked on so many open source projects, you have enabled a lot of people to make a living off of your work. Not only have you empowered Meta to do the work it needs to get done, but you've essentially created, I'm just going to call it small economies, where you have increased the accessibility of other engineers to kind of get their work done faster. How does it feel, when you get out from the world of the crazy and kind of sit and have a beer or a coffee? And do you ever think about the many lives that you've impacted?
Yeah, no, this is something I don't comprehend, because if you think about it, one of the things that always shocked me is that I've never worked on a project that actually involved money. And so all of the open source project, I've never sold anything to anybody. And so the fact that people are making a living out of the thing I've been working on is pretty mind blowing to me. And this is something the concept of money, and I don't really understand. I've been learning and everything, but to me it's oh, I'm building this and oh, it's useful to people. And then I have my day job at Meta that actually gives me oh, every month a paycheck. So this very interesting dissonance between the fact that this open source completely free thing is actually enable entire livings of people is, yeah, I don't know how that works.
It's actually quite remarkable. So we'll walk through it real quick. So you have, I was actually speaking to Chris Heilemann from Microsoft. This is as I was talking to someone who works at Kong, who is a DevRel person. He mentions Chris Heilemann as one of the OG DevRel people. First, Facebook, like I said, you and your colleagues there have created these open source tools to solve problems at Facebook first, right? Solve your own issues. But then you guys open source this stuff, and then what you start to see is companies starting up in terms of like boot camps, right? So that's like one tier. The other tier is companies using your software, right? So you have loads of companies leveraging tools like React Native, Prettier, Calidra, Yoga. I mean, the list is huge. But it's not just the companies that are using the software, it's the demand for the people to leverage those tools. And that's where I think that there's that positive vibe, I think, where you and your colleagues, you're enabling people to be more productive. And I just find it quite remarkable where you and countless others out there in the world are just like, hey, I'm solving a problem for me or for us, and we just happen to put it out here publicly, but then it goes viral, and then holy shit, you have millions of people who are leveraging your software. I mean, that's got to kind of, I don't know, feel somewhat intimidating or remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, no, this is insane. And I remember like the first, like when we did open source React, and then there's been thoughts about organizing like conferences around React. And so when we organized like the first React JS Conf, like we found like the biggest room on campus, which was like 200 people. And in practice, like when we like announced it and opened it, like it sold out like instantly. Like literally, like we actually broke the website that was handling like the registration. And then we're like, okay, what do we do? And so we like increased it to like the max we could get, like 300 people. And I remember like the CTO of Facebook, Shrep, who like pinged me saying, "Hey, I have this like close friend that like needs a spot like for his team and everything. Can you do something?" I'm like, "No," and so it was like mind blowing, like at this level happening. And then when you actually go into the room, it's like the difference between like, oh, you're helping people like in the abstract, to now you are helping, like you're actually seeing the people that like are excited and like want to work on and everything. So like this is, to me, like it went from like being something to like actually being real. And like yeah, this was a really important moment, and I'm really glad that now that COVID is like on the way out, now we are going back to actually like having a live events, and to like see really this excitement and like see each other in person is, I think, really important.
Let's take a step back. I want to learn more about you as an engineer, as a person. What made you get into software programming, and how did that lead you into Meta?
Yeah, don't come from like a rich family. So like my parents, so my father was like working in computers, but like at a like low level, and like never like get a lot of promotion and everything. And my mother stopped working to take care of like me and my two siblings. And so in practice, we are living in Paris, and at the end, we are living in like a 40 square meters, so I think it's 400 square feet apartment, like in Paris, like super tiny. And one of the thing that's like I really wanted was to like go into a computer science school. And so like I really wanted to like go to EPITA, which is like one of the best computer science school like in Paris. And the issue is was like 9,000 euros a year, which was like for the US now it's almost nothing, but like for me it was like way too much. And like my parents were like, nope, like we cannot afford that. And so the first year I took a loan to be able to do that. And in France, like the way you take loans is to be like your parents are the guarants of the loan.
Interesting.
And so if your guarants like don't have like financial stability and everything, now like the bank can refuse your loan. And so from what I understand, like in the US, it's very much like, oh, if there's no like confidence, you're going to have a higher rate. But in France, like nope, like the rate is fixed, and like this is like you're getting it or not. And so in practice, for the second year, I didn't get it. And so I actually had to ask like the people I was working at for like at Curse, like a company working on video games websites, to actually like hire me So I could work on it during like evenings and weekends. And so I basically had to do like the whole school plus working on the side in order for this. And I'm so grateful for Uber for giving me this opportunity. So I've been playing video games since like very little. And one video game in particular is Warcraft 3 from Blizzard. And one of the very interesting thing about like the map building is there's like actually what they call like a trigger editor, which is basically like you can say like, hey, when this unit enter this region, then like start moving it over there. And like with this, you can actually like program like real games. And one of the game that like was built within this called Dota is actually now like a real, like they put it out of this like editor and they made a real game. And now League of Legends is like a full game based on this concept. And I started like learning like the GUI and everything, and then like started learning the actual programming language behind the scenes. And this is like where like, oh, I really actually started learning how to program.
You co-created React Native. Can you walk us through that process? You saw a problem. How did you get to the point where you were just like, you know, I think we can do something here?
Yeah. So for this, okay, so we need to go back to 2012. So for context, so I joined Facebook right after college. And like because I'm from France originally, then going to the US meant that my girlfriend at the time like couldn't get a visa. And so we need to get married. So we were together for 5 years, but it was still like a pretty big commitment. And both of us had to move like halfway across the world in order to actually like join Facebook. And so I joined, and 6 months later, there was this big initiative around mobile first. And so at that time, like Facebook was like a website, and in practice, mobile was all of the rage and taking over the world. And the like Facebook development, the app was still like pretty small. And I remember like I joined like a conference and now I'm thinking of the name. And there was like Mark Zuckerberg actually speaking at this conference. I was like so excited, like, okay, this is like the startup scene. Like this is all I wanted, like since my childhood, like living in France. And in practice, Mark Zuckerberg said HTML5 was the biggest mistake we've ever made as a company. And I was like, oh shit. Like, what do I do? Like, I moved as a front-end engineer, like halfway across the world. I married my girlfriend to this new company, and I said like, okay, actually, we don't need your skills. And so what I did was to do a training for like how to become an iOS engineer. And I realized like, okay, the development environment is like way too slow. I cannot actually share like the things I'm working with people and everything. And this is, I also became like the biggest fan of React around the same time. And I was like, I think we can do something better. And Jordan Walk, the person that created React, like did a small hack to get JavaScript running on iOS. And he like gathered like 4 of us to do a hackathon around like actually getting React to work on iOS. And so we did. And for 3 days, so this was a summer hacks, for 3 days we hacked on this. And at the end, we got to present in front of like all of the employees that were interested. And we got like the 5 projects selected to present in front of Mark Zuckerberg. So it was like a super cool experience to like present to him and to Shred, the CTO, around our thing. And what happened next is like in the next week, like they were super excited about it, and we got to basically like pitch like our idea to every like single like director and VP that like was in the field. And so it was like pretty insane to like go from meeting to meeting, like presenting like our small hack and everything. And what happened next is so we had something concrete that could actually like show it could work, but then we needed to actually go and start like building the thing for real. And the good thing is Ashwin and Lynn, who are working on the Photos team, like wanted to build a Photos app. And what happened is they basically like started using this React Native, like React for iOS kind of prototype to build it. Now the sad thing is for 3 months like they worked on it, but at the end they were like, oh, we actually spent 3 months working on the React for iOS and not our app that we wanted to build. And they
Uh-oh.
were like, we actually like, it's like we actually want to build the app more than the infrastructure, so we're going to like rebuild it in iOS from scratch. And this was like at this moment that I like had like this big decision to make in my life, which was, okay, do I actually like commit to doing this thing or not? And this was a pretty big thing because like, okay, I was just out of college, like I think it was 1 year out of college. I moved like halfway across the world, and now I'm like, should I build like an entire like basically operating system like to compete with the iOS and Androids, like which have been like built over years by like entire teams and everything.
Hmm.
And like my mental process at the time was like, I really want to like figure out in my head, can it actually work? And this is like where like we at Facebook we have this notion of like a hacker month, where we can like join a team for a month and try to see how things are going. And if it's like if you want to stay, you can join like full time, or if you decide like no, it's not for you, you can actually go back to your previous team.
Hmm.
And so I did this, and in this month, like I basically tried to de-risk like what are all of the things I could fail. Like performance was an issue, like the fact that you could actually distinguish between something built natively or not was something else. And so we, like I and like the rest of the folks, like built a lot of like prototypes to like ensure that like all of those could be addressed. And at the end of the month, I was like convinced that this could happen, and so I basically like started working on it full time. But this was like a pretty big decision and like pretty like risky, and like you need to make some bets. And so yeah.
Yeah, that brings me back. The first time I was introduced to React Native was January 2015. I think you guys had just had a conference or some type of like public announcement,
Yeah.
and I had not heard of it. And James Pierce at that time worked with you guys. And having worked at Sencha and having a relationship with him, he's like, dude, you got to kick the tires on this thing. And I remember the first time, and I'm not trying to dramatize this at all or be overly dramatic, but I remember the very first time I changed something and I ran it on the screen. I was like, okay, cool, it runs in the simulator. But then I actually deployed it to my phone. I pushed away from my desk and I was like, oh my God, this is a game changer. And at that point, I had fallen in love with this tool. And I think you had mentioned, I want to say circa 2015, it was a conference I saw, you gave a talk around React Animated. And I think you mentioned part of the goal for React Native being allowing developers to develop applications with JavaScript that are indistinguishable from native applications. Do you feel like React Native has achieved that goal?
So in practice, yes. Now this is one of the thing is it depends on the definition. So like the best example I have is Discord. Like I'm using Discord a lot, and like both iOS and Android app are using React Native, and to me like I'm using it all the time and like they feel great. Now the question is, do they actually use all of the iOS and Android like native defaults and everything? Like the answer is no. And but at the end of the day, like, do they provide like a really, really good experience, and do they solve like the problem they're trying to do? The answer is yes. And so to me, this is more about like solving the problem and like having delivering a really good experience, more so than like are they actually using the actual real like patterns that like are offered by the platform by default. Like to me, like I'm less concerned about this. And like when we published this, like there was a conception at the time that like anything web like was different, but different in a negative way. It was like worse in many ways. And so this is like the thing I wanted to address with this.
Speaking of web, what was it like first learning about the React Native web library?
Yeah, I was super excited. So in practice, like, and this is I think one of my failure is I wanted like React Native, like at the beginning, like the way it was like thought by people is that we're going to implement it once for iOS and one for Android, because like this was the way like things were working. And I remember I talked to Adam Wolf saying like, look, I don't want this. I want to actually like have like being able to develop once and like have the best experience possible. And so now this was like the thing I wanted, and like now it was like how do we actually achieve this? And so I started looking at like every single like base level components, like a div, like a span, like a image tag, and try to figure out like what is the equivalent for all of the platforms, and like can we actually get something that like would work for all of them? And one of the things that I quickly identified is that the web was actually the most restrictive platform, because on iOS and Android you are basically doing your layout yourself,
Right.
but on the web like it didn't make sense to absolutely position everything and like recompute like text like a layout and everything. So you had to use like the CSS, the part of CSS like does the layout. And so I basically like use CSS as the like common denominator that would actually work on iOS and Android and web. Now the challenge is within the company we didn't have a need for like we didn't have a project that required like both iOS, Android, and web, and so it's never like the web backend has never been prioritized at the time. And so this was where like I was super excited to see like somebody from the outside and from Twitter actually being able to make this work. And so right now, if it hasn't changed since then, like the Twitter mobile site is using React Native Web, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned something earlier around working on React Native with the hackathon at Facebook, focused purely on iOS. And I don't know why, but I'm having flashbacks of like class names in iOS with like RCT iOS, if I'm not mistaken. And you know, seeing that React had Android on its roadmap since the early beginnings, at least from the public perspective, right? But we also saw React Native expand outside of mobile and into experimental desktop implementations. If I can recall correctly, there was an Xbox 360 implementation and Android TV implementations. What does it feel like to know that your child, in essence, right, kind of grew up and went beyond your platform expectations onto so many platforms?
Yeah. So on the how does it feel, like it feels super great. Like I'm super excited like we've been able to do this. In terms of this was our expectation, is that like the goal of this project was to break out those barriers.
I see.
Because when we look at this, what we realize is like anything that has a 2D surface is basically reinventing the wheel. And so like we wanted to break this cycle where like every single like device and like place had to re-implement like all of the like same things and in different ways and like incompatible ways. And so in a sense that like we actually achieved what we wanted out of this project. Now is this like I'm still like not happy that like it like hasn't actually solved like all of those use cases. Like we still have like native toolkits and everything. So like the expectations are like way higher on this. But I want to live in a world where like if you want to draw things on a 2D surface, like you don't have to reinvent like to learn a new set of things like all over again. And this is something like I've always wanted is like I always said is like I didn't build React Native because like I wanted it to be like to become the ubiquitous thing. I really wanted the problem to be solved, and it wasn't solved, and I didn't see anybody like trying to solve it. And so I worked on it. But the moment like there's something better that actually solves the problem that comes along, like go for it. Like I'm not attached to React Native or anything. So it's been something always in my mind.
You've worked a majority of your career in open source, according to my calculations. What was your first experience using open source?
Yeah, so this is it goes back to like gaming and in World of Warcraft, and so it was so in World of Warcraft you can actually change the UI of the game, and you can actually like use Lua and XML, which is again like why not like JavaScript and HTML like solves a very similar purpose. But anyway, and when the game was released, like you could actually like change the UI And one thing that the Cosmos UI project was a bunch of people working together and like making the UI better. And one of the very interesting thing is that this was in practice open source, but we didn't use GitHub or anything. Like we just like shared like literally zip files between each other, and like it was so successful that in practice you couldn't play the game without like this UI during the beta. And there was a meme in the community says patch day no play, because during like when there was a new patch happening, like the UI, like Cosmos UI was broken, and so we need to like actually manually patch everything and give it, so like people would just like not play the first day. So it was interesting, and it was like a very interesting like how do you actually build community around like, hey, let's all work on this together. And one of my big thing I've done here was to work on internationalization. So how do we actually get strings translated to French and to other languages? And so it was again like social creature. Like I basically organized an effort to get like everybody to like work and contribute on this. So
I was just thinking of the idea that open source itself as it creates many avenues for people to get into the open source movement. And you're actually one of the first people I've heard mention video games as an avenue. It might be just because of my current social circles being mostly app development. Did you ever want to work in the video game industry from that experience?
Yes. So, like, since I was a leader, like, I wanted to like work in the video game industry. Now, in practice, the reasonable like person in me like realized that like in practice for like the people working in video games, like the highest like ranking selection of people are the game designers. So they are the ones that are like actually like making or breaking the game. And so they are the ones like respected and like being paid more and those kind of things. And so now if you're like an engineer working on like the video game industry, like now like this is an industry known for like working a lot and like the project shut down and like not like great like working conditions.
Right.
And so now you compare it to like tech, like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and everything. Like there's a lot like engineers are like the rock stars and like the top and everything. So like for me it made sense to join like those companies on a personal level, but I'm still like always playing a game on the side and like hacking and doing stuff. So
what games do you find yourself playing today?
so right now I'm playing Minecraft, and I'm doing a silly challenge to try to get 5 stacks of every single items in the game. So you can it's fun challenge.
Mentors, like for me, played a major role, and for a lot of folks as well. Has anyone been a mentor to you and helped you develop your career?
Yeah. So for this, I would say like there are 3 people, and less on the open source side, but more on like management side. So have been like Tom Okino, so the manager of like the React team. Jonathan Bergeron was my manager like in the infra space, and Shrupa Biswas, who's like the current org leader where I'm at. And the 3 of them, like they've really like understood the way I work and really like help expand it. And so yeah, like I'm super like grateful for all the 3 of them.
10 plus years at Meta, do you find yourself playing a leadership role and being mentors to others?
Yeah, so right now like my role has shifted like I would say like 5 years ago, and now I'm like really trying to like more like coach people. And so right now, so I've been transitioning to being a manager like 4 years ago. And so right now I'm actually like mentoring a lot of like IC individual contributor to manager transitions, and to like help them like, oh, this is a new role, this is a new kind of job, like, hey, what are you thinking about, like how do you like be effective at it? So yeah.
Do you find that transition enjoyable or a challenge?
Yeah, no, so it was definitely enjoyable, but it's very different. So one of the things that I like always thought about is like I thought like at Facebook there's no drama, And one thing I realized in practice, like there is a lot of drama like any other place,
Right,
but
people.
the yeah, like when there's people, there's drama and everything. But in practice, this is the role of a manager to actually like manage this so that like, oh, it's contained and like it's being dealt with and everything. And so this is very interesting, like how as I transitioned to being a manager, like now all of the drama like went to me and I was supposed to like actually solve this.
Uh-huh.
And like this was like very stressful at the beginning because like, oh, I didn't know like how to handle it or like what should I be doing and everything. And then like as time went on, I was like, oh, like I've learned, oh, this is a skill I can like work on, I can help and everything. And so this is it's been like interesting. And the other thing is there's a lot of like you're basically like yeah dealing with people and like very high emotions. And so this is like especially at the beginning, it was like my sleep like schedule and everything was like a lot like very damaged because like I couldn't like step outside around like, oh my god, like there's this thing happening between those two people, or like this person like is not performing well, like how I can, like, is it my fault, how I can help, like. And like usually affected me personally. And in practice, one of the things that's like Shrupa mentioned to me is that you need to be able to keep your distance. And so this is like, yep, this is going to happen, and like, and this is yes or no, maybe it's your fault, but like if you're not able to disassociate and like put like some distance and like look at it from like the outside in, then you're not going to be effective because you're going to be overrun by all of your emotions. And so it's been like a very, very good advice. And so now I'm able to like, I am not saying I'm not able to do it 100% of the time, but like most of the time, like realize like, yep, this is something that's happening. And yep, at 5 p.m. I'm coming back home with my kid, and like I try to like leave it out of the door. So
Yeah, that the transition to leadership from an individual contributor, I've met so many folks who have either embraced it or have wholeheartedly rejected it. And the idea that you're not allowing someone's problems to become your problems. In other words, you're being the leader that you need to be to help them solve it, and not letting, like you mentioned, your emotions get in the way is something that I've had to mentor others in, who are like super empathetic. It sounds like to me you are. What resources have you been leveraging outside of your own mentors to grow as a leader?
So one thing is like at Meta, there's like the best training probably in the industry around like how do you do this transition. And so for 3 months, like almost every day, there's like different courses and like circle and everything around this. Plus, you assign mentors and also assign like external coaches if you want for this. And so like I've actually like 6 years ago transitioned the first time managing the React core team, and it has been reorged, and like I decided to go back to IC. But during the 3 months, I was like, oh my god, I've learned so much about this new field. And so like a few years later, I did it again. I did the full training again, and yeah, it was great. And this is one of the things which is like difficult about this is a lot of the situation that like are happening actually contain private information about people and everything. And so I've like looked for like, hey, who are the YouTubers or like the thing like happening like that are really good at teaching these kind of things online. And in practice, like there's very little because of the privacy, and everything feels like super high level and super hand wavy. And this is something like the way I've learned a lot is by like getting deep into like some space and like really understanding how to like do it, like, and learn all of the resources. So this has been like on the public side, it's been hard. Now internally, like like all of the managers are trusted to work like and to like get this information, like sensitive information, and I can share between each other. So it's been like more helpful that way.
That's really good to hear that Meta has such a great program. I have personally gotten the opportunity to work on my own leadership skills in a very similar way at an external group called Vistage, where I have been able to work with other business leaders and process issues. And it's kind of like what I learned in the Air Force as just-in-time training. In other words, it's one thing to read a book, it's another thing to watch a video like you mentioned, but it's another thing to be in the middle of a situation and process it.
Yeah.
ask the tough questions, but also, like you mentioned earlier, step back because you might have someone who's dealing with an issue with a founder or dealing with an issue with a colleague, and they're wrapped up in the emotion and what I like to call the fog of war. And so you have clarity, and you're saying, oh, I can see the forest for the trees, where right there they're kind of stuck in the middle in their lizard brain. It's just great to hear that you are evolving in that way.
Yeah, and the way I think about it is basically debugging. So, like, instead of debugging like computers, you're debugging like people. And so, like, for every kind of situation, like, oh, now you need to figure out, like, okay, what's actually happening. And so you probably need to do instrumentation. So you need to, like, start talking to everybody. And now, like, the same way, like, when you add instrumentation, it adds overheads. Like, in the instrumentation, like when you talk to people, like,
Yeah.
oh, now you're introducing yourself in, and so now you're changing the dynamics. And so, like, hey, how does this new system where you're in actually going to evolve? And so, but you want to, like, oh, get the information, like, now, like, find, like, what is the root cause, and find, okay, now that you know the root cause, like, what are the actions you can do to, like, solve it? So, yeah, I view it like basically debugging for people.
You have been out there in the world for years now. This morning I woke up and I was like, I'm going to try to find the oldest video on YouTube with Christopher on it. And the best I could find was 2014, where you were talking about how to essentially use a JavaScript inside of C++.
Yeah.
You have become a celebrity in the web space. Has that changed you as a person?
Yeah, this is super weird. Like, I remember, like, I've been doing a lot of interviews at Facebook, and I think I have more than 500 now. And I could see the switch between me, like, being like known, like unknown to being known. And there was one person that, like, actually interviewed and like started basically like shivering and crying at the beginning because, like, that person thought I was a celebrity. And I was like, what's going on? Like, I could see, like, them, like, yeah, being a fan, like, Star Trek and everything. I'm like, whoa, I didn't change, like, nothing changed. So, like, calm down, let's relax, like, this is okay. And so one thing I've been doing is, over time, like, start, like, presenting me in a way that is less like, oh, I've done all of those kind of things, and, like, yep, just like, hey, I've done this, like, one or two things, and then hear, like, listen to other people instead. But yeah, this is the downside is that now it changes, like, the way, like, people interact with you, and I wish I could, like, just remove the magic wand, like, as a magic wand, and, like, yep, I'm a person like you and me, like, yeah, we don't need to, like, change the way we work together. But the second piece that have been, like, super helpful is now, like, whenever I want to, like, get in touch with somebody, now it's very easy. Like, I just, like, oh, like, ping them on Twitter, like, follow them on Twitter, like, or email or whatever, and, like, now everybody's going to reply to me because of, like, all the things I've done, and not only, like, in tech but also in the video games, like, and everything. So this is like one advantage of this. And within Facebook, it's also been useful to open a door. Oh, I want to switch team, or I want to, like, work on this thing, or, like, get to organize, like, events and everything. Now, like, oh, it's a lot easier. So there's upside to the fame.
Has that changed anything at home between your family life?
Yeah. No, I'm not that famous that people recognize me, like, outside and everything. So in practice, no, like, I'm still, like, incognito, like, when I walk outside and everything. And my wife is like, yeah, I don't care if you're famous, like, you're going to help with the kids. So yeah.
Have you ever had any conversations with people who are looking to get involved in open source? And if do you provide them any insights as to how to get started?
Yeah. So I think for this, like, one thing I would say is, like, if you're going into the thing of framing it like, oh, I want to get involved in open source, it's probably the wrong framing. Like, I would think more about, like, hey, you want to solve a problem, and then like, let's figure out, like, hey, what is this problem, and, like, how can you help, like, actually solve this problem. And so one of the way, like, I've worked on, like, all of the open source projects I've been doing, like, both creating or, like, involved or, like, helping, has been like, hey, this is a problem I have, and I want to actually solve it, and I'm going to spend time, like, actually solving it. So for example, like, oh, if talking about XK Draw, hey, you also like are finding yourself like wanting to draw things and like for example, like one thing we just released like this morning was like putting labels on arrows. Like this is
Hmm.
something a lot of people have been asking for a while, and like Akensha, like oh, actually like spend the time building it, and now we just shipped it. And so this is like a way you can help actually like solve a problem with open source. But the mindset of like just hey, I want to be like helping with open source. I'm just going to pick a random repo, a random popular repo, and like find like a random issue
Hmm.
and start helping this. Like this is not my mindset, and out of the people I've seen successful, like this is not really like the way like this pattern is working. So
When it comes to getting into the world of engineering, because open
yeah.
source allows others to stand on the shoulders of giants, what advice would you give those individuals who are looking to get into the world of information technology and programming?
Yeah.
What are some reasons to get into it, and maybe some warning signs to not get into it?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is around like solving problems.
Hmm.
And like like love playing video games and like I've been like going and like solving like oh creating maths because it was fun and everything. And so like I always say like people hey what is your like the problem you're trying to solve? And like the good thing is like right now in technology like it's able to solve a lot of problems that people have like in their real lives.
Hmm.
And so like figure out like for example like somebody that's reconverted like is growing a lot of plants and they wanted to know like hey what is the water schedule and how do you optimize it and like what are the kinds of plant I should have that like I'm not going to kill because like this and like they built like a small app to be able to like hey this is when I watered it like to start logging it and like this is when like a reminder to do it again like this is the kind of plant that like you should be like buying and everything and this solved a problem for them and they happen to have learned hey like React and like how do you connect to the database how do you like build a UI so
How do you define success as Chris, the person?
hmm. So for me personally like I'm very like I have a very like winner like I want to win
Hmm.
mentality, and this is like very different from like the way people like interpret it. Is like this is not like Wall Street where like winning is a zero sum game. Where like if you win, like somebody else loses. So for me, it's like I want to win. I want to solve like the problem I've like set out to do. So for example, like for when I was I don't know, like when I was working on Prettier, like what
Hmm.
I really wanted was like to have like the actual formatting your code be out of the like day-to-day workflows of people, and to remove like all of the code reviews based on like formatting your code.
Hmm.
And so this was me, like for me, I was like, this is the thing I want to solve, like for Facebook, the company. And so I basically like spent like a year, like full time, like working on this. And now I'm happy because like in JavaScript with Prettier, like it's basically a done deal. Like all of the code base is formatted. But now the good thing is like this also inspired like all of the other languages that we use at Facebook to like hack FMT, like go Rust FMT, like all like Black from Python was also spun out like out of Prettier, and now like you'd be hard pressed to like actually find a language within Facebook that like doesn't like auto format. And so this is to me like okay, now this is solved, and now I can go on to the next problem. But this is one of those things is like this is going to take like for this kind of problem like going to take years, and this is the thing is like what can I do to help with this? And so I wanted for like the JavaScript, and I wanted for like to help the other people
Hmm.
to like do it for the other languages, and yeah, that's what I did.
What made you fall in love with JavaScript? Because you spent a
Mm.
majority of your career going from compiled languages like C++ to JavaScript.
Yeah.
What was it like going from a compiled language like C++ to JavaScript, and then
Mhm.
what is it about JavaScript itself that keeps you working with it?
So I think for JavaScript is not JavaScript the language,
Hmm.
but this is like what you can do with it.
Hmm.
And so like in practice, you can write websites. And so now websites you can actually like distribute it to like there's a lot of like reach you can have. Then oh JavaScript like we used it for like React Native, so now you can also like build like mobile apps with it. and the Node.js has been amazing to like, oh, now you can also write it on the server. And so this is something that like the reach it can do is super nice. The other part is like the developer like velocity around like, oh, you can actually save and reload, and like the whole thing is like feels like very like lively, and like you can like actually play with it. And so there's been like some very good characteristics. Now in practice, I'm not married to JavaScript. So like, for example, in Trackmania, like they, like a video game I've been hacking on, they created their own language for this. And so, oh, I'm like just writing code in that language. Like I've actually spent a year working on Skip, a new programming language. So I'm more interested in like what are the things you can do with it, and less the actual like programming language. But JavaScript like so far has served me really well and has blown up in the like world to like, yeah, now it's one of the most used programming language. So it's also been like a good like place to be in personally.
Yeah, it's actually pretty remarkable to watch how JavaScript itself kind of took over. You were mentioning earlier how Facebook went to HTML5 for the application and essentially declared it a failure. I can recall this was when the iPhone 4 came out. And for all intents and purposes, at that time, the iPhone 4 was actually a pretty fast device. And to see the Facebook application itself fail was quite a remarkable experience, especially when we see this massive push for HTML5 start to emerge from the industry. What has it been like for you as an engineer to watch the complexity of web applications evolve since then to now?
This is interesting. I still remember like loading Gmail for the first time.
Uh-huh.
And this was, oh shit, this is fast, and you can actually click on every single link and like instantly it appears. And same like Google Maps, so you can actually like pan around, and like this was like mind blowing to me that like, oh, you could actually do that like in the browser. And the thing that's been super interesting for me is that like I see within the industry, there's always this notion of like like product like pushes the boundary. They have to do it like manually, and like this is very like labor intensive. And so we've seen like, oh, people were writing in assembly, and then C happens, and then like, oh, now you've been able to like get like a step up in terms of effectiveness at the cost of some of the performance. And one other thing, when I was a kid, like there was the Moore law happening. And in practice, like, oh, every year, like the computers were like way faster. And so in practice, like this has been like, oh, just buy a new computer and like you can like go away with like the perf issues. And what happened is like in the past 10 years, like Moore law has stopped. And in practice, like computers are not getting faster. And so this is like now, like I remember like I had my MacBook Pro in 2014, and it was still running well. And I had to change it because it didn't have like the security like thing, but like there was no material difference between like my 10-year-old like or 8-year-old MacBook compared to like now. So M1 is like changing this, but this is like nowhere near how it used to be. And so now the ways we're actually getting better is by like the software and like the methodology and those kind of things. And so like, for example, React like started thinking about, oh, like how do we actually like rethink the mental model of like how do we work, so like we are more effective at writing the like solving the problem we want. And there's also been a lot of like optimization work happening in like all of the JavaScript like VMs. Like they've started going at war like with each other to like get the fastest one. And now like, yep, the JavaScript VMs are actually like pretty fast. And so, and now we can also see a step change with like Rust. Well, like, oh, now Rust, we can unlock this for like all of the dev tooling. And so this is interesting, like how we get this interesting wave of like innovation that's unlocking like the developer experience. Like how can we do like more faster?
Meta has been pushing the boundaries with the metaverse, and all of the criticisms aside, have you done any work with VR? Because I do recall there being a React VR library somewhere. Have you gotten into that at all?
Yeah, so React VR is actually like a fork of React Native. And so this is now used like in all of the like meta application for all of the 2D surfaces is
Wow.
now using React. And we actually like it used to be a fork, and now we are moving away from this fork, and we're using React Native, the actual React Native for this. And so this is like super exciting to me. And for the VR, like one of the things I'm super excited is I feel like I told you like, hey, nothing has been changing on the hardware side for a
Mhm.
while for like gaming for PCs and those kind of things. But now if you look at VR, like every single year, like there's a new like VR device coming out. It's like way better, more immersive than like the previous one. And so this
Right.
is to me like, okay, now we're like finally like getting into like some like super cool like shiny like new things. So I haven't like developed for it yet, but like I've definitely like played a lot of video games on VR, and like now like I'm starting to use some of my to convert some of my meetings in the Oculus. So it's pretty fun.
I have some team members who uh, are wanting to push some of our Zoom meetings
Yeah.
into VR. What is that experience? You mentioned it being
Mm.
fun. What is that experience like practically? Is it
Yeah.
actually usable? And do you have any motion sickness or anything like that?
Yeah, so in practice for motion sickness, I've never had motion sickness. So like, and I've been super frustrated. Like a lot of games like were like breeded because of people having motion sickness. So
Hmm.
there's one thing, but the for the VR is like one of the thing that's been interesting is right now I'm talking to you, and like this is basically I'm looking at a screen, like at a
Right.
2D, and like you're in this screen.
Hmm.
But and now if I have like 10 people, they are basically all one slot in this screen. But in VR, we basically have like a physical room layout
Hmm.
that's being reconstructed, and we also have like audio. Like so, if you're farther away, I'm going to hear you less.
Spatial audio,
Yeah,
yeah.
spatial audio. And so this is like very like you're immersed. So now you have to like, oh, you want to chat with somebody on your left. Now you're going to like literally like turn your head and start seeing them on your left, and going to actually like be able to engage with them. And if you want to like engage more people, you're going to speak like louder or like less loud. And
Hmm.
this is like something that feels like a lot more immersive, like you feel like you're there. And so
Interesting.
this is like this feeling is like very powerful in practice. Now the downside is the avatar reconstruction logic is
Hmm.
not like really good right now. And
Right.
so now you're like speaking with like avatars of people. And so this is one of the things where like VR is not like the metaverse is not ready yet. It's not like, oh, I'm not seeing like you in HG and those kind of things. And so
Right.
I'm still like a low fidelity avatar of yourself. And so with the new Quest, there's now cameras like pointing inside. So we can actually read like your like facial expression and everything, which actually going to help with this. And there's a lot of work happening on like, hey, how do you actually modelize like your face so that like
Hmm.
it looks like you. And the cool thing is, like if you look at video games now, like all of the AA video games, like they actually are able to like get super like realistic facial expression and everything. And so now there's a lot of work to how do you get this for like every single person, like just like taking a few picture, and now you're getting like these kind of things. So this is yeah pretty exciting.
I I I absolutely love VR
Mm.
for video gaming.
Yeah.
I must profess that or confess that I only have a Oculus Rift S2.
Mm.
So, but I have I play a flight sim called Digital Combat Simulator World, and I had gotten so into it that I ended up getting a 6 Degree of Freedom chair, a rumble
Nice.
pack, and all types of other goodies. When people ask what it's like, I tell them that with all the extras, because I've played it just on like a standalone chair that
Mm.
doesn't move. With all the extras, I often come off the thing shaking, and
Yeah.
it's usually because I got killed and because it is absolutely so immersive. You mentioned one child. I have two boys who uh, are somewhat into technology. They're more into video games than they are working on
Yeah.
the creation side. Do you envision like pushing your child to the world of technology?
Yeah, so actually I have two children. I have
Oh, I'm
Olivia who's
sorry.
8 and Victoria who's 6. And so in practice for this is like I don't but like they're going to do whatever they want. and I'm going to like open like whatever doors there are. And it's also very interesting like how like the two have like very different personalities. And so
Mm-hmm.
going back to Minecraft, I'm actually playing both Minecraft. And Olivia, my eldest, she's very much into like, okay, how do we actually play the game? How do we defeat the monsters? How we like speed run the game and these kind of things. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've played with her around like all of this, and like we've beaten the Ender Dragon and everything. And the other one is a lot more like creative, artistic, and so now this was a lot more like, okay, how do we actually make cool builds? And right now we are actually doing role play where like, oh, we built a prison together, and like she's the girl and I'm like the prisoner, and like she asked me to like do a bunch of things. So it's very interesting like how the two of them are like seeing the world differently. And video games are like a really good way to like uncover like different parts about this. And the cool thing is, in practice nowadays, at least in the school that they're in, they have computer science schools and coding schools, like classes.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are 6 and 8, and like they already like it's part of their courses. And this is something I didn't have like growing up. And so I'm really happy that like this is now part of like, hey, from early on, like, hey, starting to code and like to build and to create with this. So
One of the things you were talking about earlier was the video game industry and thinking about joining as a young Christopher. But obviously, you learn that it's a grind. One thing I talked to quite a few people who are in the video game industry, and they mention it's run very much like the entertainment industry. Like, think about like movies. You have a deadline, you have to meet the deadline. You have a budget, you have to hit the budget, and oftentimes there are these massive surges to get to that point. But that ends up getting in the way of the work-life balance. And so I'm, you mentioned that you didn't want to do that because you wanted to have a life. So, as someone as successful as you are, how were you able to achieve work-life balance? And what advice would you give someone who is struggling where work is demanding too much?
yeah. So before we go into work-life balance, one of the thing I think is different between the video games and like the space I'm in right now is for video game and the entertainment industry, like this is basically like a hit like industry where like, oh, you need to like actually like ship something, and this thing is going to last for like a few months, a few years, and then you like, oh, it's going to be replaced by something else. And so this is like, and this like cycle is like inherent into like how the like space is set up. And so the issue is like, this is basically like you're going to have a grind, because like if you're like doing the Hollywood the holidays movies, like they're going to be watched these holidays and like almost never again. And
Right.
so every holidays movie you need to have like one new or like many new movies that are going to compete with each other. Now the cool thing about like open source and software right now is that we're not in this mode. It's like when something solves like a problem. So if you think about Prettier, like now it's been a few years since it's been released, and now like it solved the problem, and so now people are using it, and like nobody is forced to like build a new one in order to like actually like obsolete Prettier because it solved the problem. And so this is like we can see it happening where like there's lifetime for project, but overall like this is not designed that way. It's more like, oh, we learn and like there's something better coming along, but like things, if they're well designed, they're going to last and like stay for a long time. So now going back to the work-life balance question. So one of the thing is the key point is like the balance. And so in practice, when I joined Facebook, like I was literally like working all of the time, like every single evening, every single weekend and everything. But it was because I was so excited that like I really wanted to like do it. And it was not because like, oh, my manager asked me to, or like the team wouldn't function without me, all those kind of things. And this is the thing that when I had my first child, then I realized, oh, I wanted to be there for my child. And then I started reevaluating, like, how do I manage my time? And so for this, one thing that I found like really interesting is in practice, there's only 24 hours in the day. And in practice, we're already working like 1/3 of it, 8 hours. And realistically, you can only work 8 more hours. Like you need to sleep. And like for like if you're actually working like 16 hours straight for long periods of time, then like you're actually not going to be 2x more productive. Like you're going to burn out and like you're going to slack and everything. So probably like let's say 1.5x more productive. And so now you're basically like you can work like your 9 to 5, or you can work like twice as much and be like 1.5 five more x more productive. But that's basically like 2x more time you can spend. But then like one thing I started realizing is like how can I get like 100x, 1000x, a million x like more impact. And so now this is where I started thinking about like now I cannot change like how much time I spend, but I can change like what are the actual projects I spend time on.
Right.
And so this is where I started thinking about like, okay, what is going to like start like impacting like fundamentally like a lot of people. And so now starting working on React Native, working on Prettier is something that like is going to like have like if I succeed, going to have a lot more impact than working on the random feature of the day that's going to be rewritten or something. So this is one thing. The other thing is, and I alluded at the beginning, is making sure you're working on things that actually last for a long time. And so whenever I like start working on a project, I want this project to be structured in a way that like it's not going to get rewritten in a year or in 2 years or in 3 years. I want it to be like so good that like, hey, this is going to be like the last time like anybody ever rewrite this like in the next like 5 to 10 years. Like I don't know about 10 plus years, but like, and I want to like think really hard into like how do we make this successful and how do we actually make it happen. And then the thing I found with this is like now like the time you spend on it is no longer correlated with the impact it has. And so now it's like how well it is designed going to be correlated. So for example, like for React, like in React Native, I spent time like probably like around 10 years. Oh my god, time flies. 10 years ago. But in practice, like React Native are still around and they're still like very successful. And now like I like don't need to be working on this on a day-to-day for this project to be actually like working and like changing like millions of lives of people or something like this. So
you are in the less than 1% of open source project creators. With so many like successful projects under your belt, have you had any failures? And what was it like where you tried to solve a problem and it just didn't work?
Yeah. So I've had one, and this is when I joined. It was not around open source, but so as I mentioned, like we're going mobile first. And so at the time, like one of the projects I was working on was to re-implement the photos gallery, like when you can click on a photo and like start swiping and this kind of things in JavaScript in HTML5 in the browser, and like to prove that like, hey, like we don't need to go native. And I spent like I think 3 or 4 months like really like trying really hard and everything, and I just like it just didn't work because of like the browser limitation, the gesture and everything. And so I was actually like super like pissed at myself around like, oh no, like I made a bet and couldn't make it. But the thing in practice, the way I think about it is I only commit to things when I know it's going to work. And so I think this is I do a lot of, like I have a lot of ideas and everything, but I only work on like one every year or two.
Okay.
I really say that I'm going to like really push it. And and when I do, like I do my homework and my research and everything to like, what are all of the things that are like, I know are going to fail and everything. So that like when I do it, it actually becomes successful. And so this is something like I'm seeing a lot of people like don't have this mindset around like, oh, they're working on this and like, oh, if it doesn't work or if it becomes hard and everything, like, yeah, they just like move on and everything. But no, I'm like, no, I'm intentionally choosing the things that I know I can like make work and succeed. So this is different mindsets.
Yeah, that's actually quite remarkable. Most of the folks I've talked to thus far have gone straight to build, and then it either succeeds or fails.
Yeah.
And sometimes the failure is even before it gets past the very high level idea phase. Have you ever thought about publishing your workflow, like your risk analysis?
So one of the thing is, in practice, a lot of it is in my head, and so it's really hard to like translate this. But this is something I may want to do, and I may call you out on this to like force me to actually write this down. But yeah, no, I haven't thought about this.
Well, the reason I ask is because um, there's a ton of energy, and I mean mental and time,
Yeah.
that gets put into testing an idea. I
Mm.
mean, just like I labeled you an inventor, like
Yeah.
oftentimes you have a hypothesis, you
Mm.
implement the scientific method to see whether your hypothesis is correct,
Yeah.
and you kind of have this kind of cycle. But for individuals who have not been successful,
Mm.
or maybe at the 5% of the people who have been successful
Mm.
with open source and in solving a problem at scale, right? Because
Yeah.
truth be told, you might be able to solve a problem for you, but
Yeah.
it may not be scalable for others. Which to me,
Mm.
it sounds like you're intentionally making a decision to choose to tackle a problem that solves the problems for many versus
Yeah.
just yourself. So I think that could be a fantastic addition to your wins. It's like how does Christopher actually think about it? What's his mental model? What's his mental framework? And maybe even putting it in practice retroactively with a tool like Yoga, Prettier,
Yeah.
Excalibur, whatever you choose. And so yeah, that's what I was wondering, like, if you thought about that, because that could be tremendous for the up and comers who are looking to solve a problem.
That makes sense. So I also want to call out something like I have a lot of privilege, like going into this. So now, like I'm working, as I mentioned, at Facebook, at Meta, and now if I reach out to anybody, like oh, they see like they're going to respond to me. There's also the fact like I've been successful in the past, and so now like for example, like I'm playing around with the idea of a video editor. And
Yeah.
like you can see it on Twitter, and now like oh, I'm being introduced to the people working on the video editing API from inside of Chrome, and so this is like not something like everybody has. And
Right.
same like now I have like 50,000 followers on Twitter, and so now whenever I do something, oh, people are like going to listen to me. So this is something that like people also should realize. Like I have like it's a lot easier to do repeat successes because like oh now I have like already like I'm playing in a field that's like cards are like helping me.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like the like I'm lucky, but like I'm a white dude in tech, and so like I like have a lot of like privileges given this, and like not everybody has like this, even though like I didn't choose it. So
Wait, you're telling me when you're born you didn't choose to be a white dude? I'm just kidding.
yeah.
So privilege is something that I think I was even explaining to my own kids who are half Japanese, half Puerto Rican,
Mm.
but being mostly light skinned, that it's they're inherently born with. Do you find that do you have opportunities to enable others who don't have privilege with your work at Meta?
Yeah, so one thing, as you ask, I'm actually mentoring a lot of people. I'm trying to like spend my time mentoring like women in tech,
Mm.
and to really like yeah, they're amazing, and like how do you help them like grow and everything. And I'm seeing like yeah on a day to day like some of the change that they're facing. So and I've seen this firsthand, like oh going to a conference with them, like oh people when they like see them they're asking, "Hey, are you an engineer?" Like this is
Mm.
the first question. And like when I go to a conference, like nobody has ever asked me if I was an engineer.
They just assumed.
And yeah, they just assumed. And same I'm seeing in meetings where like, oh, people are actually not like when they say something, they're not like they're like in like not intentionally, but in practice,
Mm.
like double like not giving it the full trust that they would have. And then
Right.
like, oh, if they speak up, then like, oh, they feel like they're like, oh, being loud or like bossy, all those kind of things. And so this is something that's like I've seen firsthand happen. And or same like I was in an interview and like somebody like way more senior, I think she was a director at the time, like was actually like shadowing me as I was training to be an interviewer for a new like type of roles, and like they would listen to me and not and dismiss like the other person idea just because
Mhm.
like I was a man, even though like I was like they were like more competent and like everything in there. And this is like
Interesting.
mind-blowing like when you think about it, but this is their reality. And so I'm like, this is something like, yeah, like you need to like take into account, especially as a manager, where like, oh, you're like assigning projects, or like you're like setting up teams and everything. Like they are living with this on a day-to-day basis. So like, what are the things you can do to like like even the playing fields, like try to like understand the biases, and like making sure like we're evening it out. So
As someone who is empowering others to be successful, what advice would you give those in privilege to even the playing field for those who don't have the same privileges?
yeah, so I think for me is like what I'm trying to do is like spend more of my time like to like working with them, and also like evangelizing them, like behind closed doors, like singing their praises like way more than man, like at a certain thing, to like really make sure like they have their voice being heard and everything. The other thing is to like acknowledge the biases. So I'm running a lot of like events. And one of the things that is super unfortunate, but when we do a live stream and the woman is speaking, like all of the comments, like the live comments, they tend to like focus on their like appearance
And it
and not
looks, oh
on
God.
the like the actual like facts. And so one thing I've been starting doing, which is like super unfortunate, but like to turn off the live comments when a woman is appearing, and with their like blessing and everything. And we found like, yeah, this was actually like better for it. But yeah, this is like those kind of things that are unfortunate. And this is one thing I really love about like Facebook is we have a training, like a bias training. And the idea is like, this is not like, we shouldn't assume that there's no bias. We should assume that there is bias, and we should understand the bias and act knowing this. And so this was like to me mind blowing, because I was thinking, oh, like this is a corporate thing. They're going to be like no bias, like treat everybody the same and everything. But in practice, like in order for everyone to be successful, we need to understand the biases and to act accordingly. So this really like opened up my mind around like, oh, this is interesting that this was like framed that way, and I think it makes a lot of sense in practice.
One of the things that you're conjuring a memory up of is watching the arc of, or the transition for conferences, specifically the React conferences. What has it been like for you to see, as someone who is an advocate for the underprivileged, watching the conference industry change to create or to increase the diversity of speakers?
Yeah. So I think for this, one of the thing that I've like observed is in practice, like women tend to be like less outgoing and apply less to like those kind of events.
Right.
And so, and I don't know like the reason and everything, but like this is something I've like seen in practice. Is I know somebody like doing some cool stuff, and like they're not going to actually like submit a proposal and everything like on their own. Compared to like a lot of men, they're like, oh, even if they did like half as good, like they're just going to like more likely, again, this is like not absolute rules, this is like more like distribution, they're more likely going to like publish like something. And so this is one thing I've like we've been doing, is to like intentionally look out for more like people like from like less recognized background. And like in addition to like, yeah, just letting anybody to actually like present. And so I think this has been helpful. The other thing that we've started doing is like training, like public speaking and training and those kind of things. And like this for everybody, but like for whoever wants to actually get public training speaking, so like they have a better like shot at like, oh, making an impression, those kind of things. Now the flip side of this is like, and this is something we should also think about, is there's a big focus on diversity and presence in terms of those events. And so now like in practice, like the ratio of like women compared to men in tech or like in this like sector is actually like way smaller. And so what happens is like it tends to actually like put pressure on those like few women. And now like they are being asked to like speak at like so many like events in part because like the pressure to have like diversity and everything. And so now they tend to like not be able to focus on their work because now they're asked to like speak at like 20 events during the year, and compared to like other engineers that like didn't speak at any but was able to focus time. And so this is also something you should figure out, like as you're doing this kind of thing, is like what is the actual load that you're putting on those people. And while this is good at like they are speaking at one or two, and it's going to be really good for their career, like speaking at like 5 or 6, if it's not their job during like a 6 month period, is most likely going to burn them out rather than like to actually help.
What are some other areas where others can learn about you?
Yeah, so I think Twitter, and I have a blog like visual.com where I post like very infrequently, but like some of the talks I'm doing and everything. But yeah, those are like the two main ways. And like if you have cool ideas about like fun things you want to work on, like feel free to DM me on Twitter or like send me an email. I'd love to like take a look.
That sounds great. We'll make sure to include links to getting in contact with Chris and following him in the show in the comments below. Christopher, thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon, my man.
Thank you so much. It was amazing.